Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Smackdown and AEW Rampage review. Smackdown was from the Bon Secours Wellness Arena in Greenville, South Carolina, while Rampage was taped from the Notice Center in Dayton, Ohio. And Smackdown tonight, I thought it was a decent show in my opinion. We had Braun Strowman and Ricochet versus Imperium, Giovanni Vinci, and Ludwig Kaiser. This was the finals of the Tag Title Contenders tournament where the winners will face the Usos next week on SmackDown for the titles. We had the SmackDown Women's Championship on the line where Charlotte ended up defending the title against Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville requested that she would get a rematch for the SmackDown Women's Championship against Charlotte. We had the Viking Raiders. They ended up taking on Holland and Butch. We had the Elimination Chamber qualifying Fatal 4-Way match where it was Natalya versus Zelina Vega versus Shayna Baszler and Shotzi. And then we heard from the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns making a statement on the Bloodline. But overall, SmackDown was a decent show tonight. But let's jump right into the review. So SmackDown opened up tonight with Kayla Braxton. Kayla Braxton was in the parking lot, and in came a black SUV into the parking lot of the arena. And out of the SUV came Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, Roman Reigns, and Paul Heyman. Of course, no Jey Uso because, Jey ended up walking out of the Bloodline last Saturday at the Royal Rumble after they end up attacking Sami Zayn. So Kayla Braxton ended up asking the Tribal Chief if he can give an update on the status of Jey Uso with the Bloodline. So Roman didn't say anything. He walked away. Paul Heyman ended up stopping at Kayla Braxton. Paul Heyman ended up telling Kayla that was such a cold-blooded question, but from such a warm-hearted lady. Paul Heyman ended up telling Kayla Braxton that they cannot confirm nor deny what the status of Jey Uso in the Bloodline is. So Paul Heyman ended up thanking Kayla Braxton for wearing their colors because Kayla Braxton was wearing red. So then Paul Heyman walked away, and pretty much that was basically that. To which Jey Uso did not appear on the show tonight. So then we went into the arena, and we kicked off with the first match of the night. And it was the finals in the Tag Title Contenders Tournament, Braun Strowman and Ricochet versus Imperium, Giovanni Vinci, and Ludwig Kaiser. The winners will get to face the Usos for the titles next week on SmackDown. And this was a pretty good match, in my opinion. So we have Braun Strowman and Ricochet. They end up coming out first. And then Giovanni Vinci and Ludwig Kaiser end up making their way out. They were accompanied by the Intercontinental Champion, Gunther. So the match got underway. Strowman ended up pushing Vinci down. Vinci ended up getting back up and tagged in Kaiser. So we had Strowman end up delivering some right hands to Imperium as they end up leaving the ring. Ricochet ended up tagging in. Kaiser ended up getting back into the ring. Ricochet then delivered a dropkick to Kaiser, and then he delivered a forearm, to which Ricochet followed up with a jawbreaker to Kaiser. Vinci ended up distracting Ricochet, and Kaiser ended up delivering an uppercut to Ricochet. Strowman ended up hitting Vinci with a running shoulder block on the outside. And then we saw Strowman and Gunther. They ended up going face to face. Kaiser ended up delivering a suicide dive onto Strowman, but Strowman ended up catching Kaiser. Vinci climbed up to the top rope, and he delivered a splash onto Strowman, which took Strowman and Kaiser down. So then as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Imperium was in control of the match. They ended up double teaming on Strowman in the ring. Kaiser ended up going for the cover, and Strowman kicked out. Kaiser delivered some right hands onto Strowman, and Vinci ended up tagging in. So Vinci ended up grabbing Strowman. Strowman then ended up delivering a back body drop to Vinci. And then Ricochet ended up tagging in. And then Kaiser ended up tagging in. And Ricochet delivered a crossbody to Kaiser. So we had Vinci end up coming in. He ended up hitting Ricochet with a head scissor. And then Ricochet delivered a flying forearm, followed up by a standing shooting star press, which looked great. So Ricochet ended up going for the cover, and Vinci kicked out. Ricochet then lifted Vinci up. Vinci landed on his feet, and he threw Ricochet shoulder first into the ring post. So Kaiser was then tagged in. Kaiser ended up going for a drop kick in the corner to Ricochet, but Ricochet moved out of the way. Ricochet then delivered a back elbow onto Kaiser. And then Strowman ended up coming in. Strowman ended up knocking Vinci off the ring apron. Ricochet ended up running to the ropes. Strowman ended up launching him over the top rope onto Imperium on the outside. So then at this point, Gunther and Ricochet were face to face. Ricochet ended up pushing Gunther. Gunther ended up pushing Ricochet. And so the referee ended up seeing that, and the referee ended up kicking Gunther out of ringside. He ejected him. So then, as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Braun Strowman was in control of the match. Braun Strowman ended up delivering a monster bomb onto Kaiser, and then he tagged in Ricochet. Ricochet climbed onto Strowman's shoulders, and Ricochet delivered a nice-looking senton off of Braun Strowman's shoulders onto Kaiser. So then Ricochet ended up going for the cover, and there you go. Braun Strowman and Ricochet end up winning the match, and they will get to face the Usos for the SmackDown Tag Team titles next week on SmackDown. Overall, this was a very good match, but the Usos are going to retain the titles next week. They're not losing them until WrestleMania, so this tournament was booked for the ones to face the Usos, who are Braun Strowman and Ricochet. They are booked to lose. Braun Strowman and Ricochet are going to lose the match next week against the Usos. That's the reason why they booked this tournament. The winners will lose to the Usos. And then we saw Kayla Braxton. Kayla Braxton was backstage with Charlotte Flair, the SmackDown Women's Champion. Charlotte ended up saying that her match against Rhea Ripley is going to be epic. But tonight, her focus is on Sonya Deville. So Sonya Deville ended up coming in. She ended up saying that she wants the SmackDown Women's Championship. And it will be her against Rhea Ripley. And they will be in Hollywood. Because Hollywood needs a star. So Sonya Deville ended up saying that she is a star. Charlotte then ended up laughing, and she ended up telling Sonya Deville to save the trash talk for the ring. And that was pretty much basically that. And then as SmackDown came back from the commercial, they aired a clip of a segment for NASCAR because NASCAR returns on Sunday. It's going to be in Los Angeles. And it involved the New Day and Rey Mysterio. And then Dominic Mysterio, Finn Balor, and Damian Priest, the Judgment Day, were there. And Rey and Dominic were going back and forth. Rey and Dominic end up racing. And we saw, Rey end up winning the race. And then Dominic was like, oh, you cheated. If Mommy was here, it would have been different. And so then Rey and Dominic started to brawl. And that was basically that. So a little promotional segment for NASCAR's return, which is going to be this Sunday on Fox. So that's the only reason why they did this. But it looks like probably at WrestleMania, we'll be getting Rey Mysterio versus Dominic Mysterio. So I sense that happening come WrestleMania. And then we had Sonya Deville versus Charlotte Flair. SmackDown Women's Championship on the line. Sonya Deville ended up going to Adam Pearce and requesting that she get this rematch for the SmackDown Women's Championship. And this was just a very meh match in my opinion. So we had Sonya Deville end up coming out first. And then Charlotte Flair came out, of course, with that awful fucking music that she has. So the match got underway. Both of them end up locking up. Charlotte ended up taking Sonya Deville down, connected with a shoulder tackle. Charlotte then started taunting Sonya Deville. And she was asking Sonya Deville, oh, you're not trash talking now. So they end up circling the ring. Charlotte ended up applying a waistlock before she ended up delivering a takedown to Sonya Deville. Charlotte then wrenched Sonya Deville's arm. Sonya Deville ended up pulling Charlotte's hair and turned it on her. Charlotte ended up cartwheeling out of that, but she ended up whipping Sonya Deville into the corner. Charlotte then ended up rolling up the turnbuckles, and she ended up landing on the apron before delivering a big boot to Sonya Deville. Charlotte ended up going up to the top rope, ended up hitting a high cross body block to Sonya Deville. She ended up going for the cover. Sonya Deville ended up kicking out. Sonya Deville sidestepped an avalanche, and she ended up charging away at Charlotte. Charlotte then dropped Sonya Deville on the apron. Charlotte then forearmed Sonya in the face, but Sonya ended up quickly pulling Charlotte down by her hair. So then as SmackDown came back from the commercial, we saw Sonya Deville. She was in control of the match. She ended up taking it to Charlotte. Charlotte ended up avoiding a kick from Sonya, ended up rolling her up. Sonya ended up kicking out too. Sonya ended up quickly taking Charlotte down, and she ended up going for the cover to which Charlotte kicked out. Sonya Deville then ended up grounding Charlotte and ended up applying a chin lock to Charlotte. Charlotte ended up fighting up, and she ended up hitting a snapmare to Sonya. She ended up punching Sonya back, and Sonya Deville ended up kneeing Charlotte. Charlotte then ended up blocking a bounce into the corner. She ended up bouncing Sonya Deville off the top turnbuckle. So Sonya Deville ended up coming back, delivered a kick to Charlotte's knee. She ended up charging at Charlotte, but Charlotte ended up rolling under, and she ended up hitting a pair of clotheslines to Sonya. Charlotte then ended up delivering some chops to Sonya Deville, and she connected with a back suplex. Charlotte kicked up. She started posing, and the crowd there in Greenville were giving Charlotte a good reaction, a good ovation. I'm like, ugh, why? So Charlotte ended up hitting the ropes. She connected with a big boot to Sonya. She ended up going for the cover. Sonya kicked out. Charlotte then grabbed Sonya, but Sonya ended up elbowing her back. Charlotte then ended up putting Sonya Deville on the apron. She ended up going for a big boot, but Sonya Deville ended up avoiding that. You had, later on, Charlotte ended up setting up Sonya Deville in the corner. She climbed up the ropes. Charlotte ended up going for a moonsault, which, that moonsault is still fucking awful from Charlotte. She does an awful moonsault. Then Sonya Deville ended up getting her feet up. Sonya Deville ended up rolling Charlotte up with her feet on the ropes, and then Charlotte kicked out. Charlotte ended up getting out of the figure four, which Sonya Deville ended up going for a sunset flip. Charlotte ended up rolling through, applied the figure four into the figure eight, and then Sonya Deville tapped out. So there you go. Charlotte Flair ended up winning the match, retaining the SmackDown Women's Championship. Overall, very meh match, and Sonya Deville just needs to move on from the SmackDown Women's Championship. And then we saw Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, Paul Heyman, and the Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns, backstage. Reigns ended up asking Jimmy where Jay is. Jimmy ended up saying to Roman that he doesn't know, and that he hasn't heard from him. Reigns ended up saying that he finds that disrespectful. He ended up saying not only did Jay walk out, but now he's not communicating. And he was like, oh, don't you guys have a title match next week? You don't walk out on your obligations. So Reigns then again ended up asking Jimmy if he has talked to Jay. Jimmy sat up and he ended up saying to Roman that he has not talked to Jay. Jimmy assured Reigns that Jay will be there when they need him. So Reigns ended up asking if Jay will be here for the entire bloodline. And so he ended up saying, has Solo heard from him? Jimmy ended up saying that Jay isn't talking to anyone. So Reigns then ended up asking Paul Heyman if it's WrestleMania season. Paul Heyman ended up confirming that it is WrestleMania season. So Reigns ended up demanding that Jimmy and Solo Sikoa find Jay now. So both Jimmy and Solo end up getting up and they end up walking off. And pretty much that was basically that. And then we had the Brawling Brutes, Ridge Holland and Butch, versus the Viking Raiders, Eric and Ivar. Of course, they were accompanied by Valhalla, a.k.a. Sarah Logan. And this was a decent match here. Butch and Ivar started the match. Ivar ended up powering Butch into the corner, and he backed up. Butch ended up punching back at Ivar, but Ivar ended up overpowering Butch and started beating him down the corner. Ivar with Butch hard headfirst into the turnbuckles, and then Eric ended up tagging in. Eric then ended up whipping Butch into the corner. Butch ended up coming back and he booted Eric, and Eric ended up fighting out, and Butch ended up chopping Eric. Ridge Holland ended up tagging in, and he shoulder tackled Eric down. Eric ended up getting out of a suplex attempt by Ridge Holland, and he punched him. He punched Ridge Holland. Eric ended up attempting a suplex, but Holland ended up blocking it. Holland ended up hitting a vertical suplex to Eric, and he tagged in Butch. Ridge Holland ended up getting Eric on the apron. Butch knocked Ivar off the apron, and so the Brawling Brutes end up double teaming on Eric. They end up delivering the 10 beats of the Bodhrán. Butch ended up going for a plancha, but Eric ended up moving. Butch then ended up going face to face with Valhalla. So then Eric ended up sending Butch headfirst into the barricade, ended up hitting a running forearm to Butch. So then as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Butch ended up snapping Eric's fingers, and he tagged in Ridge Holland. Ridge Holland ended up hitting Eric with a pair of T-bone suplexes. Ridge Holland then trapped both arms, ended up hitting a belly-belly suplex to Eric. Ridge Holland then sized Eric up, but Eric ended up kneeing Ridge Holland in the face. Ivar tagged in. He ended up kicking Ridge Holland. Ivar then set up for a pile driver, but Ridge Holland ended up countering that into an Alabama slam to Ivar. And points in this match, the feed, I don't know if you all caught this, but the feed started flickering a little bit. Like it was going like in and out. Guess they were having problems over there. Ridge Holland ended up grabbing Ivar, but Ivar ended up powering Ridge Holland into the corner and started throwing elbows at Ridge Holland. Butch ended up blind tagging in. He kneed Ivar. Butch ended up kicking Ivar back, and Eric ended up tagging in. Butch ended up hitting Eric with an enziguri, and Eric ended up responding by delivering a clothesline to Butch. Eric ended up kneeing Butch in the face, and he ended up going for the cover, to which Butch kicked out. Ivar tagged in. Ridge Holland then pulled Eric out of the ring. Butch ended up fighting Ivar on the top rope, and he ended up hitting a Hurricanrana to Ivar. He ended up going for the cover, and Ivar kicked out. Butch ended up going to the second rope to deliver a moonsault, but Ivar ended up catching Butch, and he ended up powering Butch up. Butch ended up sliding into a sleeper hold as Eric ended up tagging in. Eric ended up knocking Butch down. Ridge Holland then charged at Ivar at ringside, but Ivar ended up dropping Ridge Holland with a spin kick. Ivar then tagged in, and so Eric and Ivar then stared at Valhalla. And they then end up hitting Butch with the Ragnarok. So there you go. The Viking Raiders ended up winning the match. Post-match, the Viking Raiders went up the ramp, and then Drew McIntyre and Sheamus came out. McIntyre and Sheamus end up attacking the Viking Raiders. They end up brawling on the stage. McIntyre sent Ivar into the LED wall on the stage. Ivar ended up shoving McIntyre off, but McIntyre ended up booting Ivar to the back. And McIntyre and Sheamus end up celebrating, and pretty much that was basically that. So this feud between Ridge Holland, Butch, Sheamus, and Drew McIntyre with the Viking Raiders is still going to continue. Looks like it. So then we saw Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt was in a rocking chair watching the highlights of the pitch black match from the Royal Rumble with him versus LA Knight. And Uncle Howdy ended up walking up. And the screen braked. And pretty much that was that. But I'm like, that's it? That's it, what we saw with Bray Wyatt tonight? Just him watching highlights of the pitch black match that he had with LA Knight at the Royal Rumble. So then we had the Elimination Chamber qualifying Fatal 4-Way match. It was Shotzi versus Zelina Vega versus Shayna Baszler versus Natalya. Shotzi ended up making her way to the ring in her tank. And then we had, as SmackDown came back from the commercial, the match ended up beginning, which this was just a very meh match, in my opinion. Natalya ended up quickly going after Shayna Baszler. Shotzi pulled Natalya off and started punching away at Shayna Baszler. Natalya then knocked Shotzi back, and she ended up stomping Shayna Baszler out of the ring. Shotzi then ended up attacking Natalya, ended up hitting a shoulder tackle. Zelina Vega then pulled Shotzi out of the ring, sent her into the barricade. Zelina Vega then squared off against Natalya in the ring. She ended up rolling Natalya up, and we had Natalya kicked out. And so backstage we saw Raquel Rodriguez, Smiley Raquel, and Liv Morgan. They were watching the match. Of course, both women are in the Elimination Chamber. They didn't have to qualify. So Zelina Vega ended up hitting Natalya with the code red, and Zelina Vega ended up going for the cover. Shayna Baszler broke up the pin. Shayna Baszler then slammed Zelina Vega and went and attacked Shotzi. Shayna Baszler then ended up hitting Shotzi with a backbreaker, and she ended up grabbing Shotzi's arm. Natalya ended up attacking Shayna Baszler from behind. She ended up throwing Shayna Baszler to the apron. Baszler then ended up avoiding the shoulder and kicked Natalya. Zelina Vega ended up pulling Shayna Baszler off the apron, but Shayna Baszler ended up clotheslining Zelina Vega down. Baszler got into the ring, and she kneed Natalya in the face, which, of course, that was the same move that broke Natalya's nose 3 months ago. So Shayna Baszler ended up going for the cover, and Natalya kicked out. And then as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Shotzi was fighting out of a chin lock that was locked in on her from Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler ended up punching Shotzi down. She ended up going to stomp at Shotzi's arm, but Shotzi ended up avoiding it. Shotzi then ended up kicking the knee in Shayna Baszler in the face, and then Shotzi ended up avalanching her against the ropes. Shayna Baszler then ended up falling to the floor. Shotzi then ended up hitting the ropes, ended up hitting Baszler with a suicide dive. And then we saw Zelina Vega. She ended up going up to the second rope. She ended up hitting a moonsault on Shayna Baszler and Shotzi on the floor. Natalya ended up grabbing Shotzi and got Shotzi back into the ring. Natalya applied the sharpshooter on Shotzi, but Zelina Vega ended up hitting Natalya with a bulldog to break up the sharpshooter. So then Shotzi ended up hitting a German suplex to Zelina Vega, which looked, scary. That was a scary spot there with the German suplex. Shayna Baszler then ended up hitting Shotzi with a German suplex, and she ended up putting Zelina Vega in the Kirifuda clutch. Shayna Baszler then ended up releasing the Kirifuda clutch, and she ended up avoiding a discus clothesline from Natalya. Shayna Baszler then ended up going for the Kirifuda clutch on Natalya, but Natalya ended up knocking Shayna Baszler out of the ring. Natalya then ended up applying the sharpshooter on Zelina Vega, and Zelina Vega ended up tapping out. So there you go. Natalya ended up winning the match. So Natalya is going to be in the Elimination Chamber. So she ends up joining Raquel Rodriguez, Liv Morgan, Asuka, and Nikki Cross. And of course, the winner of the Elimination Chamber there, the winner will get to face Bianca Belair for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania. So, and of course, the final woman in the Elimination Chamber will be decided this Monday on Raw, where it's going to be Candice LeRae versus Mia Yim versus Carmella versus Piper Niven. So those four will battle for that last spot in the Elimination Chamber. So that is basically that. But overall, very meh match in my opinion. I mean, I would have liked to see Shayna Baszler in the Elimination Chamber than Natalya. So I don't know why they went with Natalya to go into the Elimination Chamber. If I was booking this, I would book Shayna Baszler to win this Fatal 4-Way and have her going into the Elimination Chamber. And then we went backstage, and we saw Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman was informing the Tribal Chief that Jey Uso's phone goes straight to voicemail. So I guess Paul Heyman was making a call to Jay. So Jimmy Uso and Solo Sikoa end up coming back. And they end up saying that they couldn't get a hold of Jay. Reigns then shook his head, ended up saying that he doesn't understand of all the times of the year for this to happen. And Reigns ended up saying that they were doing so good. No problems, no hiccups. Reigns ended up saying that he has a lot on his plate and that they understand the stress and burden of this position. Reigns ended up saying that he feels like he's being spread too thin right now. So Reigns ended up saying that he loves them and apologizes for speaking to them the way he does. Jimmy ended up telling Roman not to worry about it. Reigns ended up saying that he needs them to be as strong as they ever were. If they're not, there's no more of this. So Reigns ended up saying that he has a good dinner for them on the bus. Reigns ended up saying that he wants Jimmy and Solo to go on the bus. Reigns ended up saying that he has to go into the arena to handle some business. So Reigns ended up telling both Jimmy and Solo to eat and enjoy. And pretty much that was basically that. And so then we had Roman Reigns end up addressing the state of the bloodline. But before that, they end up announcing what we're going to see next week on SmackDown. So, of course, we're going to be getting the Usos versus Braun Strowman and Ricochet for the undisputed WWE Tag Team Championship, to which the Usos will win, of course. And then we're going to have a Fatal 4-Way number one contenders match. It's going to be Rey Mysterio versus Santos Escobar versus Karrion Kross versus Madcap Moss. And the winner will get to face Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. So pretty much, it's the same what they're doing with the Tag Title Contenders tournament. The winner of this Fatal 4-Way will face Gunther, and they will lose to Gunther. So my pick to win the Fatal 4-Way next week, I hope they go with Karrion Kross. So that's my pick. Karrion Kross to win the Fatal 4-Way. Even though if he wins and he faces Gunther, he will lose. But that's what we're going to see next week on SmackDown. And then we had Roman Reigns addressing the state of the bloodline. Roman ended up coming out. He was accompanied by Paul Heyman. And Reigns has been champion for 887 days. So Reigns got into the ring. We had a Sammy chant breakout from the crowd. Reigns ended up saying, "Greenville, South Carolina, acknowledge me." So then we had another Sammy chant breakout. Reigns started pacing the ring. So Reigns ended up saying that he was going to ask what they wanted to talk about. But it's pretty obvious. Reigns ended up saying that he would rather sit here and talk about Cody Rhodes, the guy that won the Royal Rumble and is the number one contender for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Reigns ended up saying that's a guy that deserves his attention. He ended up saying instead these simple folks have reduced him to talking about the past. Reigns ended up saying that there are two sides to every story, so we're going to hear his. So Reigns ended up saying that in order to hear his side, they have to go back to War Games. And, remember War Games, Reigns ended up seeing green in Sami Zayn. So, of course, that's the night that he looked into Sami's eyes and told the world he's seen everything he needs to see. And that he saw greed that night. Reigns ended up saying that he saw the same thing he's seen in everyone he interacts with nowadays. He ended up saying that if a restaurant was lucky enough to have him, the hostess, the people in the kitchen, the waiters, and waitresses all ask him for something, like he hasn't done enough already. Reigns ended up saying that he gave Sami the opportunity of a lifetime. Instead, Sami ended up using him, his bloodline, and his island of relevancy. Reigns ended up saying that there is no different from anyone in the crowd, and that they all want, and never give back. Then all of a sudden, Sami Zayn ended up attacking Reigns from behind, and Sami Zayn got a huge ovation from the crowd. Sami Zayn was yelling at Reigns. Reigns ended up fighting back with some knees to Sami's face. Reigns started stomping Sami Zayn down, and Reigns ended up telling Paul Heyman to get him a chair. Reigns then took the chair, but Sami Zayn ended up spearing Roman. And Michael Cole was so good here on commentary. He was selling the hell out of Sami Zayn attacking Roman. So Sami picked up the chair. Sami ended up going to hit Roman, but Roman ended up immediately rolling out of the ring. Sami then grabbed the mic. He ended up saying that Reigns is wrong about him. Sami ended up saying that he never wanted anything from Roman until now. Sami Zayn ended up saying that he wants something from Reigns and that he's going to take it. Sami ended up saying that he's coming after Reigns and the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. So then suddenly, Jimmy Uso superkicks Sami Zayn down. Sikoa then headbutted Sami Zayn a few times, and then he delivered the Samoan Spike to Sami Zayn. Sikoa started punching away at Sami Zayn in the corner. Jimmy Uso then put the chair around Sami Zayn's neck. Sikoa ended up going for a running hip attack, but Reigns ended up stopping Solo. Reigns looked down at Sami Zayn. He took the chair off of Sami's neck, and we had the fans end up chanting, "We want Jay." Reigns ended up saying that he doesn't have Jay because Sami Zayn broke up his bloodline. Reigns ended up saying that he gave him an opportunity, but instead he broke up his family. Reigns ended up saying that he wants Sami Zayn in Montreal at Elimination Chamber, so he can break Sami Zayn in front of his entire family, his wife, kid, parents, and friends. So Reigns ended up saying that he'll see Sami Zayn soon. So Reigns ended up pulling up the titles, and that was how SmackDown went off the air. Overall, really enjoyed this closing to SmackDown, and Sami Zayn ended up attacking Reigns from behind. The crowd ended up popping huge for Sami Zayn. It was good, and we're gonna get the match at Elimination Chamber. Roman Reigns defending the undisputed WWE Universal Championship against Sami Zayn. But of course, Sami Zayn is going to lose the match at Elimination Chamber. So we all know where that's going to go. So Roman Reigns is not losing the title until WrestleMania. He's not losing the undisputed WWE Universal Championship until WrestleMania, until Cody takes it from him. And so the Usos are also going to lose the titles at WrestleMania, and that will be the end of the Bloodline. But overall, decent SmackDown tonight. Moving on to AEW Rampage, which Rampage was a decent show tonight. We had the World Trios Championship on the line, where the Elite end up defending the titles against Ethan Page, Matt Hardy, and Isiah Kassidy. We had Swerve Strickland versus Brian Pillman Jr. We had Saraya and Toni Storm versus the Renegade Twins. And the main event, it was Roosh versus Christopher Daniels. Overall, Rampage, decent show it was. So Rampage opened up with the Elite versus Ethan Page, Matt Hardy, and Isiah Kassidy. World Trios Championship on the line. This was a very good match here. So the match got underway. We had the crowd. They were behind the Elite. Was the Bucks and Kenny Omega. And Isiah Kassidy and Nick Jackson end up locking up. They end up taking each other down. Nick took Isiah Kassidy down with an armbar. Nick then tagged in Matt. Matt ended up coming in, and the Young Bucks end up double teaming on Isiah Kassidy. So Matt Jackson tagged in Kenny Omega. The fans were behind Omega. Omega ended up getting his visa issues cleared. So that's why he appeared on Dynamite on Wednesday. So Isiah Kassidy ended up tagging in Matt Hardy. Both Kenny Omega and Matt Hardy ended up blocking up. Matt attempted to hit the Twist of Fate, but Omega countered that. Omega ended up attempting to hit Matt Hardy with a knee, but Matt Hardy ended up moving out of the way. Matt Hardy ended up going to the outside as Kenny Omega ended up following him. Ethan Page then nailed Omega, and then he was tagged in by Matt Hardy. Ethan Page attempted to go after Kenny Omega, but he ended up tagging in Nick Jackson. The Young Bucks ended up double teaming on Ethan Page. They ended up driving Page down to the mat. Isiah Kassidy ended up coming in, but Matt Jackson ended up taking it to him. Ethan Page and Kenny Omega were on the outside. Nick Jackson leapt over the top rope and took out Ethan Page on the outside. So Matt Hardy was yelled at in the ring by Ethan Page, and he ended up coming back into the ring. Ethan Page ended up rolling out. Matt Hardy ended up hitting Matt Jackson with a side effect, and he ended up going for the cover, and Matt Jackson ended up kicking out. Ethan Page then demanded that he be tagged in. So Matt Hardy ended up tagging Ethan Page in. Page came in and nailed Matt Jackson with a spine buster. And then as Rampage came back from the commercial, Ethan Page ended up leveling Matt Jackson. Page ended up tagging in Matt Hardy, who then smashed Matt Jackson's head several times on a turnbuckle. So the fans were behind Matt Hardy. They were chanting, "Delete, delete, delete." So we had Matt was on the second rope. Matt Hardy was on the second rope. And Ethan Page ended up taking himself in. So Ethan Page then mimicked Matt Hardy because he was going, "Ah." So then Matt Jackson ended up putting up knees as Page ended up coming down. Matt Jackson ended up making it to the corner to tag in Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega ended up picking up Page, ended up dropping him, and then he followed up with a moonsault press. Kenny Omega ended up going for the cover on Ethan Page, but Ethan Page ended up kicking out. So Page ended up pushing Kenny Omega into the corner. Isiah Kassidy ended up tagging in. Matt Hardy, Isiah Kassidy, and Ethan Page ended up taking out Kenny Omega. The Bucks came in, and they ended up super kicking Matt Hardy, Isiah Kassidy, and Ethan Page. Nick Jackson ended up hitting Matt Hardy with a senton. Isiah Kassidy ended up hitting Kenny Omega with a senton, an awesome senton. And the fans were chanting, "Holy shit." Kenny Omega ended up hitting Page with a knee. And then the crowds went from a "holy shit" chant to a "this is awesome" chant. Nick Jackson and Isiah Kassidy were exchanging blows. Kassidy ended up coming back with some blows to Nick Jackson. Nick ended up following up with a kick to Isiah Kassidy. Kassidy then ended up charging Nick Jackson, who moved out of the way. Stokely Hathaway ended up walking out from backstage. So Isiah Kassidy ended up hitting Nick Jackson with the Canadian Destroyer. Matt Hardy ended up hitting Matt Jackson with a Twist of Fate as Isiah Kassidy ended up going for the cover, but it got broken up by Kenny Omega. Isiah Kassidy ended up hitting Nick Jackson with a cutter. He ended up going for the cover, and Nick Jackson ended up kicking out. Kenny Omega was tagged in, and he ended up hitting Isiah Kassidy with the V-trigger from behind. Omega then picked up Isiah Kassidy, ended up dropping him with the one-winged angel. And the Bucks ended up coming in. They delivered the BT trigger to Isiah Kassidy. Nick Jackson ended up going for the cover. And there you go. The Elite ended up winning the match, retaining the World Trios Championship. Obviously, very predictable. But overall, it was a very good match. Back and forth between these teams. It was entertaining. And then we saw Lexi Nair. Lexi Nair was backstage. She was interviewing Ricky Starks. Starks ended up saying to Lexi Nair that he put his foot in his mouth Wednesday night on Dynamite. He ended up saying that is what he has to do to get out of the web of Jericho he is in. Starks ended up saying that it doesn't matter. And El Paso, it won't matter who it is. And that he will beat Jericho again. So that was what Starks had to say. Starks has to do the Guevara and Daniel Garcia gauntlet. So in order to get his hands on Chris Jericho, he has to go through Matt Menard, Angelo Parker, and then Daniel Garcia and Sammy Guevara in order for him to get to Chris Jericho. And then we saw Jay Lethal, Jeff Jarrett, Sanjay Dutt, and Satnam Singh. They were talking about the best friends and Orange Cassidy and Danhausen and all about the fake Golden Globe. I don't care about this. They're fighting over a fake Golden Globe. Awful. So then we saw Swerve Strickland versus Brian Pillman Jr. And this was an okay match here. Both Swerve and Pillman end up locking up. Pillman has wrist locked up by Swerve, who drove Pillman down to the mat. Swerve ended up rolling Pillman back, and he ended up getting to his feet. Both guys ended up locking up again. Swerve had Pillman in the corner. Pillman ended up hitting Swerve with a kick. So we had Pillman end up hitting a drop kick on Swerve, and then he ended up hitting a flying drop kick to Swerve. Swerve ended up going through the ropes. So then, as Rampage came back from the commercial, both Swerve and Pillman were exchanging blows to the chest. Swerve picked up Pillman. Pillman countered with a thrust kick on Swerve. Pillman then attempted to pick up Swerve, but Swerve ended up getting out. He ended up kicking the inside of Pillman's knee. Swerve nailed Pillman in the face with a kick. Swerve ended up going for the cover, and Pillman ended up kicking out. So then we had the Mogul affiliates. This is Swerve's team. He had, of course, Parker Boudreaux and the tattoo guy, which I heard now his name is being called Trench. Not Trent, Trench. So they end up coming out, and Swerve ended up picking up Pillman, dropped him with a Death Valley driver on the apron, followed up with a stomp to Pillman's sternum. So we had the Mogul affiliates end up coming in. They took out Pillman. Swerve was getting ready to hit Pillman with a chain. And so Dustin Rhodes' music ended up hitting. Dustin ended up running down with a piece of a turnbuckle, and he ended up making the save. And so that was basically that. So Swerve got the win. But overall, it was a okay match. So then we got a video package of the House of Black. The House of Black doesn't want Eddie Kingston, and Eddie Kingston doesn't want the House of Black. So pretty much that was basically that. House of Black doesn't want a piece of Eddie Kingston. Kingston doesn't want a piece of the House of Black. And then we had Toni Storm and Saraya versus the Renegade Twins. This was a squash match here. So we had Toni Storm and Saraya end up win the match. Saraya, they're doing that once a month, match with Saraya, so Saraya doesn't have to take, many bumps. So, but they end up winning the match. Toni Storm end up hitting Storm Zero on Shalette. And pretty much that was basically that. Post-match, Saraya and Toni Storm end up having spray paint. It was green spray paint, and they spray painted L's on both the Renegade Twins like they were the NWO. So that was basically that. And then we had a video package with Adam Cole talking about his return to the ring. And it should be coming soon. Adam Cole, he's still, recuperating. And then we had the main event. Rush versus Christopher Daniels. And this was a good match here. Christopher Daniels ended up coming out first. And then Rush. Rush was accompanied by Jose and Preston Vance, or his new name, Pero Pellegrino. What a stupid name. Stupid new name that they gave him. Pero Pellegrino. You believe that? So the match got underway. The fans were behind Christopher Daniels. Both guys ended up locking up. Daniels ended up getting control of the match. He ended up locking up Rush. Christopher Daniels took Rush down. He attempted to lock up with Rush. Rush came back with an armbar to Christopher Daniels. Christopher Daniels was looking to go for a hip toss on Rush, but Rush ended up countering. Christopher Daniels ended up clubbing Rush to the back of his head. He ended up going for the cover on Rush, but Rush kicked out. So, as Rampage came back from the commercial, Rush was stomping on Christopher Daniels. Rush had controlled the match. Rush then ended up kicking Christopher Daniels, who rolled to the apron. Rush then ended up pushing Christopher Daniels to the outside. And Pellegrino, Preston Vance, ended up slapping Christopher Daniels. And he ended up throwing money in Christopher Daniels' face. So Vance then ended up nailing Christopher Daniels again, rolled him back into the ring. Rush then ended up tossing Christopher Daniels to the outside as Rush distracted the ref. Christopher Daniels ended up coming back, and he tossed Jose into the ring post, and he got back into the ring. Christopher Daniels ended up coming back with an elbow to Rush. He dropped Rush with a sit-down powerbomb. And Christopher Daniels ended up coming back. He delivered some elbows to Rush's head. Rush came back, ended up hitting Christopher Daniels with some thrust kicks. Christopher Daniels ended up recovering. He ended up hitting Rush with the Death Valley driver. He ended up going for the cover, and Rush ended up kicking out. So, President Vance, or if you want to call him Pellegrino, ended up distracting Christopher Daniels, and Rush rolled up Christopher Daniels, and Christopher Daniels ended up kicking out. So Christopher Daniels ended up coming back. He planted Rush down to the mat. Christopher Daniels climbed up to the top rope, and he delivered a moonsault, which looked absolutely great. Good moonsault that Christopher Daniels does. Christopher Daniels ended up coming down, but Rush ended up getting his knees up. Christopher Daniels was in the corner, and Rush ended up nailing Christopher Daniels with the bull horns. He ended up dragging Christopher Daniels to the center of the ring. He ended up going for the cover, and there you go. Rush ended up winning the match. And that was how Rampage went off the air. Overall, very good match between Rush and Christopher Daniels here. But overall, decent Rampage it was. But overall, that's it for the Smackdown and AEW Rampage review. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and until next video, I'll see you all later.